the whole time. The recording can be found on Campus Ministry's YouTube page afterwards. So Aimee Murphy is the founder of Rehumanized International, a nonpartisan secular organization dedicated to bringing an end to all aggressive violence against human beings through education, discourse, and action. After a personal conversion of the cause against abortion as a teen, she was able to claim and defend a holistic ethic of nonviolence during her time in university, the consistent life ethic. Through her work with Rehumanized International, Aimee is reaching people all over the globe with a consistent message of human rights and is creating and engaging in effective dialogue to change hearts and minds. She's been featured in news media outlets such as MSNBC, Marie Claire, Cosmopolitan, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Vice News, and many more. She currently resides in Pittsburgh with her profoundly supportive husband, their dog, and in spirit of radical hospitality, whichever friends wander into the Murphy household. So I'm going to pass things over to Aimee now.
Hi, y'all. I am so grateful to be here today. I have a little presentation here. Let me know if you can see it. I think it probably is showing.
Yeah.
It looks great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. So I have a lovely little half-hour presentation, and then we will save Q&A for the end. And here we go. So you might be wondering what I am going to be talking about today. It looks like the whole talk is going to be about bad words, right? Well, in a way, it is. In many conservative circles, feminism is treated like a four-letter word. It's associated almost solely with pro-choice politics and bra burning. And in the popular feminist circles, pro-life is treated as the swear word, associated with the idea of stripping women of rights and chaining them barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. But I'm here to tell you today that not only can you be a feminist, but that being pro-life and pro-woman really do go hand in hand. To give you a little background on myself, my name is Aimee Murphy. I'm the executive director for Rehumanized International. Oh my gosh, I'm not anymore. I'm sorry. I'm the director of publications. I stepped down as executive director on January 1st of this year, and our new executive director is Herb Garrity, and he is amazing, consistent life ethic icon. Definitely look him up. But I'm the founder of Rehumanized International, and we are dedicated to bringing an end to all aggressive violence against humanity through education, discourse, and action. We as an organization are dedicated to an ethic of nonviolence, and I figured that I would let you catch a glimpse of why we personally started down this road to see how I adopted this ethic as my own. So imagine me as a sophomore in high school. I was gangly and pudgy at the same time. Of course, I had the requisite acne and braces. I played sports, but I was also a grade A nerd who played 3 instruments and went to honor bands and band camp every year. I cared passionately about human rights. And though at the time I didn't know it, I was also a Hufflepuff at heart. Loyal, principled, compassionate, and all that. I called myself a feminist, and I wanted to do something for human rights. But despite my support for human rights as a vague, nebulous idea, I didn't know what that looked like in practice. So when I was 16, I was an atheist, feminist, pro-choicer. I was in an on-again, off-again relationship with a guy. And on Valentine's Day, just about 16 years ago, he forced himself on me and raped me. I was broken by that experience, and I could finally see how abusive he really was. But March went by and April came, and I still hadn't had a period. I was panicking, thinking that I was pregnant by my rapist, thinking of nothing but abortion. I was a straight A student, a starter on the JV basketball team, an honor band musician, slated to go to an Ivy League school. Word got around that I thought I was pregnant, and eventually it got back to him. He came and pulled me out of class one day. He said to me, "Aimee, you need to get an abortion. I'll drive you and I'll pay for it, but you need to get it taken care of. If you don't get an abortion, I'm thinking that I might kill you. In that moment, I became pro-life, whether or not I wanted to be. I knew that I could never participate in violence. But in that moment, I also understood what so many women go through as they are pressured and coerced by partners, family members, academic, and business institutions. Because what my rapist was telling me was, you're an inconvenience to me, you're an inconvenience to my future, therefore I'm going to kill you. So what right did I have to inflict that same harm that was being threatened against me upon a defenseless human being? How much better would I be than him if I chose the path of violence to reach my goals in life? Honestly, it was because of the feminism that I had already adopted before that I realized that I could not use oppression to seek my own liberation and success. I knew that I could not pass on this patriarchal oppression to an innocent child. In the moment when my own life was threatened, I adopted a philosophy of nonviolence. In the moment when my own life was threatened, I knew more than ever that I must live by my feminist principles. In the moment when my own life was threatened, I knew that I had to do something to stop the violence of abortion. Understanding that violence could not be the solution, I was drawn further into feminism. Now, you might be thinking, but Aimee, feminists support abortion, the most terrible and massive act of violence against another human being, against the innocent and defenseless preborn child. And you wouldn't be totally incorrect. Second-wave feminists were, I think, seduced by the lies and deceit of men like Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who helped to change the meaning of the word. So now the term feminist is nearly synonymous with pro-choice. But I think we can embrace the F word. We can reclaim it by returning to its roots. Feminism is the movement for social and political equality, regardless of sex, gender identity, or other circumstantial factors. The core principles of feminism are equality, non-discrimination, and nonviolence. So let's look at those ideals a little closer and see where our modern feminists went wrong in supporting abortion. Equality. It's the idea that all human beings, regardless of gender, race, religion, politics, age, size, or any other circumstance, are equal in dignity, moral value, and before the law. Non-discrimination. The idea that any act of discrimination, whether it be sexism, racism, ageism, or ableism, is contrary to this equal human dignity. And nonviolence. The idea that non-discrimination in practice means that every human being has the right to live a life free from violence. So to go back to a foundational point, let's do a little refresher on some 10th grade biology. To boil it down, the product of a same species conception is a member of the same species from the very beginning. In layman's terms, we are human beings from the moment that we are conceived. A fused ovum and sperm of human parentage isn't a rock or a tree or a rabbit. They're a human being. An embryo or fetus isn't a different species classification. It's a demarcation of age. There are fetal pigs, fetal cows, fetal dolphins, and fetal humans, just to name a few. And whenever someone responds that the embryo or fetus is just a clump of cells, I feel the need to remind them that indeed we're all clumps of cells. Scientifically speaking, that's what all humans are made of. So I'm all about declaring that as a big clump of cells, I stand in solidarity with tiny clumps of cells. Every human is made of cells, and all of us, regardless of our age or size or location or degree of dependency or gender or race or religion or nationality or sexual orientation or socioeconomic status, share the same inherent human dignity. We all deserve to live free from violence. And in fact, any sort of feminism that supports abortion actually reinforces structures of inequality, discrimination, and violence. Because the preborn, whether zygote, embryo, or fetus, is a human being according to all scientific measures, abortion is clearly an act of violence against this child. Whether it's by starvation, dismemberment, or poisoning, a successful abortion always aggressively kills a human being. This is not an act of self-defense, and we can see that because violence is an act of discrimination, it creates a structure of inequality. Abortion, in fact, is directly contrary to the core principles of feminism. In truth, when you actually examine the core tenets of feminism, the better question is whether you can be pro-choice and feminist. To be pro-life for every human being at all stages and all circumstances seems to be the only possible conclusion for feminism properly understood. To compound the inequality perpetuated by abortion culture is pregnancy and maternity stigma. Not only is there discrimination against the preborn, but also against their mothers. There is a lie perpetuated by the abortion industry and pro-choice proponents, even though they might not say it outright, that we often hear, usually indirectly. It's that women cannot be successful or liberated without the right to abortion. But these folks are more or less implying that in order to be empowered, women must have the legal right to kill their children. This is a falsehood that lies in the patriarchal structures which insist that the wombless male body is the default. Think about it. If men's bodies are the norm, then anyone who seeks a career would seem to need the ability to be free from the responsibilities of bearing children. If men's bodies are the norm, then pregnancy is like a disease condition. If men's bodies are the norm, then it seems that women must be just like men in order to be successful. To say that women must be just like men is not respecting the unique characteristics of women. It is not true equality to require that women must give up that unique life-giving capacity in order to be successful. It is submitting to structure of the patriarchy to perpetuate the idea that mothers are inherently disempowered, that they cannot achieve their dreams and goals without the right to kill their children. This is an especially insidious lie on college campuses, as college-age women have abortions at a higher rate than any other age group. It's more or less an unspoken understanding. Don't get pregnant in college, because if you do, you won't be able to succeed, you won't be able to graduate, you won't be able to get a good career, you won't have any happiness in life. It's like that scene from Mean Girls, right? Like, don't have sex because you will get pregnant and you will die. Like, no. If you don't abort, you're shamed. If you don't abort, you're alienated. If you don't abort, you're seen as a failure. Abortion is pushed as the only way out for high school and college-age women. Think about it. How many of you actually know someone personally who is a pregnant or parenting college student right now on your campus? It's telling that we don't see too many. According to the Guttmacher Institute, the pregnancy rate amongst 15 to 19-year-olds was 43 per 1,000 women by the most recent standard statistics. So it isn't as if there aren't any teens becoming pregnant. The question is, how are these teens responding when faced with difficult or unplanned pregnancy? When we review the data, we see that of all of the patients having abortions, 12% are under 20, while 33% are between the ages of 20 and 24. College-aged women are the most vulnerable to abortion, with teens falling not too far behind. So then we know what the next question should be. What resources are we offering to pregnant and parenting students on your campus or at high schools and colleges around the nation to affirm life and to promote nonviolence instead of just tacitly accepting the violence of abortion? If you're a pro-life feminist, You all should be working to connect students to these resources. You should be working to break down pregnancy and maternity stigma among your peers, in your schools, and in your churches. As I've often discussed with young people who worry over how their parents or their church will react to their unplanned pregnancy, I tell them, though in your belief system, extramarital sex may be a sin, pregnancy and motherhood are not. We must tell young women in these circumstances to hold their heads up high, because even in our churches, young women have been kicked out, been told that they can't go to mass, that they won't be allowed to attend their Catholic school any longer. Because choosing life in our very anti-life culture, even in our churches, even in our Catholic institutions, can be hard when your peers and your church would shame you instead of support you. So be a witness to the value and dignity of her life and the life of her child. Show every person facing a difficult pregnancy compassion, love, and support. We can do better than the false paradigm that modern feminism has sold to women over the past 50+ years. We can love women and their preborn children. We can support them and tear down the patriarchy in the process. We can destroy the paradigm that says that women are less than men, that mothers are inherently disempowered, that pregnancy is a disease condition, and that children are problems to be solved. In fact, we can do better by reviving the memory of first-wave feminists and suffragists who understood that violence is not the answer to crisis, and that women would never be served by the killing of their children, even while in the womb. Now, for these first and second-wave feminists, I'm not saying all of them are perfect. A lot of them, unfortunately, grew up in a time where racism was really prevalent. But I think that they had something that they were really correct on when it comes to the liberation of women and the dignity of preborn children. For example, Susan B. Anthony refused to run ads for Restylism, which is the cloaked term for a chemically induced abortion back in the day. In her newspaper, The Revolution, she just said, no, we're not going to run ads for Restylism, even though they would have been lucrative. She founded, ran, and edited The Revolution with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was her dearest friend and co-worker in the movement for women's rights. Now, Elizabeth Cady Stanton was pretty badass. She fought pregnancy and maternity stigma by announcing the pregnancies and births of her children with flag waving. At a time when women would basically go away and hide their pregnancies and come back with a 2-month-old, she was basically like, yeah, I'm pregnant. Yeah, I'm having babies. Babies are awesome. She said, when we consider that women are treated as property, it is degrading to women that we should treat our children as property, to be disposed of as we see fit. And Elizabeth Blackwell, who was one of the first female physicians, responded to hearing of Madame Restel, the one who Restylism was named after, by saying, "The gross perversion and destruction of motherhood by the abortionist filled me with indignation and awakened active antagonism. That the honorable term female physician should be exclusively applied to those women who carried on this shocking trade seemed to me a horror." And then we have Alice Paul, who was a first-wave feminist and suffragist who was key in getting women the right to vote and was the original author of the Equal Rights Amendment. She lived to see the regretful case of Roe versus Wade before her death in 1977. And she famously said that abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women, and told Feminist for Life founder Pat Goltz that first-wave feminists largely opposed abortion. Speaking of Feminists for Life, many feminists of the second wave also opposed abortion and created the first explicitly pro-life feminist organization in 1972. Pat Goltz was literally expelled from her NOW, or National Organization of Women, chapter due to her protestations against abortion, saying that abortion was a clear violation of feminist principles. And a contemporary of Galt's, Mildred Jefferson, was the first Black woman to graduate from Harvard Medical School. And she was an outspoken advocate for women, minorities, and preborn children. She said, "I am at once a physician, a citizen, and a woman. And I am not willing to stand aside and allow this concept of expendable human lives to turn this great land of ours into just another exclusive reservation where only the perfect, the privileged, and the planned have the right to live." Our contemporary pro-life feminist groups have multiplied, and there are so many wonderful organizations that have this core belief, yet whose particular missions are varied. There are so many great groups with which you can get involved as people who stand for the dignity of both women and preborn children. So I've obviously mentioned a lot of pro-life feminists who are women. The question then comes up, is feminism for everyone? A lot of guys think that because it has a word that sounds like feminine in it, that they must not fit. But as Malala Yousafzai recently said, "I hesitated in saying I'm a feminist." But she goes on, "I decided there's nothing wrong with calling yourself a feminist. I am a feminist, and we all should be feminists, because feminism is another word for equality." Malala gets at the root of why feminism is for everyone. The core of the philosophy is equality of all human beings. And this idea has spread even now, so even many male celebrities like Benedict Cumberbatch and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Patrick Stewart all embrace the term feminist. Now, some people might say, well, I identify as egalitarian. I don't think that women should be above men. And feminists who understand the core idea would agree with you. Feminism is not about women being above or greater than men. It is supporting equality for every human being, but understanding the historical context and ongoing inequality that discriminates against women, and understanding the need to address those structures of inequality in our culture. And while I'm not one of those people who is going to scream in your face and insist that you absolutely must identify as a feminist, I will entreat you on this. Those of us who have privilege should use our voices to bring justice to the disadvantaged. Advocacy is one of the keys to feminism. This goes for born privilege, using our voice to speak for the most disenfranchised, the preborn, who are still vulnerable to legal violence. This goes for male privilege. So those of you who are men, use your voices to call for just work environments for working mothers, for better maternity and paternity leave, for laws that protect pregnant workers so they can't be fired, and so forth. And pregnant and parenting students experience an immense amount of disadvantage in their educational pursuits. So for those of you who aren't in that underprivileged situation, use your privilege to advocate for the pregnant and parenting students on your campus, for childcare resources, for family housing, for creative solutions to aid in the education of parents with unexpected pregnancies. Lastly, I want to broaden the scope so that when we talk about pro-life feminism, we aren't merely talking about just being anti-abortion. Part of the really positive growth of the modern feminist movement has been a focus on intersectionality, the understanding that each of us as human beings is multifaceted, full of multitudes, and that many aspects of our lives intersect, such that we care about more than one issue. For example, some labels that describe my lens on life include things like Latina, queer, Catholic, female, granddaughter of immigrants, middle class, born. Who we are and how we see the world is more than one-dimensional. The obvious example of intersectionality that we often bring up is the case of the Black woman, who face discrimination not only because they are Black, but also because they are women. So not only can white women not quite understand their intersectional experience of oppression because they're white and have that level of privilege, but Black men also can't quite understand the full scope of oppression that Black women experience because of this intersectional lens. So who we are and how we see the world is more than one-dimensional. And we know this deep inside, that each one of us has selfhood. And though it's not contained in labels, intersectionality helps us to see how oppression is complex and our lives are interwoven. I would normally ask a question to the crowd. I'm gonna pass on that this time around, unfortunately, because we're over virtual means this time. But the thing I want to illustrate is, think about it like this. How many of you have a best friend or a spouse? And how would you feel if we just stole away that friend or that spouse and replaced them with someone who kind of looks like them, you know, same hair color, same eye color, same tone of voice, same height, maybe same skin tone. Maybe they even have several of the same interests as your best friend or spouse. Like, how would you feel about that? Every time except for one, the one was a ornery teenage boy. Everyone has responded, you know, I wouldn't be okay with that. And I ask why. And they say, well, because it wouldn't be my person. It wouldn't be my best friend. It wouldn't be my spouse. Like, even if you replace them with someone sort of like them, there's this je ne sais quoi that makes us who we are, that makes it so you can't trade or swap one person out for another. Because no one aspect or even grouping of aspects makes us who we are. And in this complexity of who we are as humans, we can see that even something like how we are raised can drastically impact how we see the world. Humans have a habit of seeking power, of creating in-groups and out-groups, and systematically oppressing those out-groups. And though we might like to think that we're all enlightened and holy and good, we probably all have some implicit bias, some instinctive, unspoken preference for those in the in-group. If we are pro-life feminists, we should constantly be seeking to address this implicit bias that exists within our sphere of influence. So acknowledge the bias, acknowledge the oppression, even when it's hard. I think an easy example of what implicit bias can mean is illustrated through a lot of stories of employment discrimination. So there will be, you know, like the same resume with two different names turned into a job application process. And one of the names sounds stereotypically white, and one of the names sounds stereotypically Black, as we might say. And almost, you know, without fail, the white resume will be passed on for the next level of interviews, but the Black resume will be skipped on and, you know, will be rejected from the process. And there's that level of implicit bias that employers have, where something as simple as a name could trigger that implicit bias. So acknowledge the bias, try to understand and really break open where you might have that implicit bias in your own heart. I know it exists in mine, and it's something that I still deal with day in and day out, because I was raised in, unfortunately, you know, a very white supremacist culture. Not saying that my parents are white supremacists, but the entire culture of the United States of America is one that is just steeped in a history of racism and white supremacy. So acknowledge the oppression, even when it's hard, even when it throws us out of the in-group. Whether there is violence happening in the abortion clinic against the preborn, or harm happening to Black youth because of police brutality, or harassment happening on social media against LGBT people, or immigrants facing deportation and dismembered families, or children caught behind enemy lines, suffering under the destruction of drone bombings. Let us be prepared to speak out against injustice, against the bias and oppression that exists within our culture and in our governments. Let us work together to build a world where every human being is respected, valued, and protected. Let us build a movement that is radically inclusive. Let us create a culture that demolishes systemic violence by upholding the dignity of the marginalized and dismantling structures of oppression, and by creating a world based in equity, where all are seen as equally human, with equal dignity and the same shared right to live free from violence. The new movement in feminism is one that understands these multifaceted aspects of who we are as human beings. I think that we can take this cultural moment in the feminist movement as an opportunity to bring awareness to the ageism and ableism inherent in abortion. I think that we can bring about an understanding of the humanity of the preborn. I think that we can help the newest feminists see the necessity to adopt a holistic feminism that doesn't leave any humans out. I think that we can even help the newest feminists to see the patriarchal structures that are inherent in the reasoning for abortion. I truly believe that the future of our pro-life movement is feminist, and the future of the feminist movement is pro-life. And I'm working passionately to build that future. But how do we do this? I believe by living the principles of community, solidarity, and mutual aid that have been so well cultivated in feminist spaces. And that transfers into how we'll respond to abortion when it is eventually made illegal. If we understand that abortion is a communal trauma, a violence committed within the context of a lack of community, a lack of solidarity, a lack of mutual aid, then we understand that restorative justice is necessary to recognize the violence of abortion and heal the rifts of community. I think if we demonstrate that we love them both, then the feminists of today will be the pro-lifers of tomorrow. I do hope that you see that the F word isn't as scary as many in the conservative media would have us believe. Being pro-life and feminist is not only doable, but I firmly believe that they go together like almond milk and cereal. I am proud to stand with 200 years of pro-life feminists who would agree that telling women that they can't be free without abortion is misogyny. And us pro-life feminists are proud to tell Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, we are finished with the lie that women aren't free unless babies die. And when you think about it, isn't it the most progressive of intersectional feminisms to say that no matter your gender, size, location, ability, sexuality, race, religion, age, or any other circumstance, every human being deserves equal rights. Every human being deserves to live free from violence. Indeed, though we're often asked how one could be a feminist and pro-life, I think the better question is actually this. When you believe that feminism is based on our human equality, how in the world can anyone be pro-choice and feminist? Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing now. Stop sharing. Okay, y'all. If you have a question that you okay, I have lost, there we go, there's the window. If you have a question you want to ask me privately, and not like with the whole group, that's a-okay, and that's fine with me. You could always write me an email to Aimee at rehumanizedintl.org. That's AIMEE at rehumanizedintl.org. But if you are up for asking me a question here, I'll be here until we're done, which I think is, like, we still have like, not quite 20 minutes, but a little less than that. So, yeah, thanks for listening.
It looks like some people are typing into the chat too, so I don't know if you...
Okay, let me see if I can, let's find the chat. Show conversation. There we go. Thank you, Anne. Okay.
Amy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I don't know what people are writing, but I just want to, could you say just a few words about why and how you started the organization? What was, besides your own sort of perspective and beliefs, what was the impetus to have that happen?
Yeah, so in college, I got somehow wrangled into being the president of the pro-life club at my university shortly after it started. And one thing that I wasn't a huge fan of in the group was how partisan it was. It was really like founded around the 2008 election with a lot of other conservative student groups. And they made me president without knowing my politics, which was fun. So after I became president, we had a lot of members of the club who were LGBT, who were atheist or agnostic, join because they saw it as an inclusive space, because I myself was on the cusp of like where I was about religion at the time. I would say I was agnostic when I became the president of the club. And I was definitely like openly queer. So it was an interesting experience. And over the course of time, we ended up having discussions about like, well, are we just an anti-abortion group or are we more than that? And we eventually all decided that we all supported a consistent life ethic that really was the foundational principle of our belief in, you know, opposing abortion was this inherent dignity of every human being. And so we became a consistent life ethic club at that point. So when I graduated, I was like, oh no, I can't be done doing activism and stuff just because I'm done with school. College students really don't understand how much time and opportunity they have to be doing activism and things like that. So I was working part-time, I guess I was actually full-time at like an urgent care center. And I hadn't done anything related to activism in months. And I was like, oh no, I can't be done doing stuff. So I was, you know, posting on Facebook in a LGBT pro-lifer group. And I was like, hey, is anyone else interested in like doing consistent life ethic activism or a conference or something? Like, I need someone else to really like help me get the ball rolling for this seed of an idea that I had. So it was in 2011, we decided to start a magazine, decided that a conference was too much to ask for right off the bat. And that was Life Matters Journal. And Life Matters Journal is still like the legal name of Rehumanized International. Rehumanized International is like a doing business as name for the organization. So yeah, it started off as this itty bitty little thing that I ran out of my tiny apartment living room. And ever since then, you know, we've had just so much growth. I think really the idea was to engage young people with this consistent life ethic, to make it understandable, to make it digestible for young people, and to really present this cohesive and comprehensive perspective on social media in a way that was engaging. So that was, you know, almost 10 years ago now. And one of the like spoken goals of the organization at the very beginning was that I wanted to make it a space where I would have felt comfortable when I became pro-life at 16, when I was an atheist, queer, liberal teen, you know, who didn't feel like I fit in within the broader pro-life movement. So that's, you know, been part of our mission ever since. It's not only, you know, I think we, in a nutshell, would like to call it, we want to be a movement of every human standing for the rights of every human. So it's a place where everyone can belong in working to fight for human dignity. So, yeah, I mean, there's been obviously a ton of growth for the organization ever since. Definitely check us out, rehumanizedintl.org, where our amazing team members do a great job of keeping up the website now that I am no longer responsible for that job. So there's a lot of info on there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I see a question from Joan Plumley. What about the question of voting? I meant to say one party is against abortion, but not pro-life in other ways. The other is pro-life in many ways, but supports abortion. Yes. I'm not sure if you guys can see my fun shirt. Just stand up a little bit. It says politics kills, choose life. And it has both of the main party animals and the sorts of violence that each supports. And voting has definitely been a hot subject of contention within our organization ever since we were founded, honestly. So there are several pages on our website where we direct people from all sorts of different political backgrounds, you know, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Democratic Socialist, Green Party, etc. Basically just to work for the principles of the consistent life ethic within their party. You know, like, I feel like there are so many good things about, for example, like the Green Party. Like, they even have a nonviolence plank as part of their, you know, like, party guiding principles. And yet they still support abortion. And so, you know, I'd say, like, for people who are Greens, work within your party to help them understand that abortion is an act of violence. Now, when it comes to voting, like actually entering the voting booth, people have often asked me, like, how do you approach the voting booth? And I'm like, with trepidation and anxiety and angst. Because we're really, like, forced into this position where we feel like we have to choose the lesser of two evils over and over and over again. And I really think that it's contributed to this position that we're in at this point. You know, at least, you know, a year ago, I could easily say, you know, the lesser of two evils has gotten us to this place where the evil just keeps getting more and more evil. You know, and I think the fact that Trump is considering a run in 2024 is something that should be, you know, just like a massive, obvious indictment of our two-party system. So I just think we need to demand better. I think that continually kowtowing to this, you know, lesser of two evils argument really just has resulted in this culture of violence. Personally, for myself, I will often say that my low bar for voting is asking candidates, obviously not personally, I don't think I've talked to a single presidential candidate on a one-on-one basis, like, can they pass this low bar question of, do they support violence or do they oppose violence? And if the question is, you know, if the answer is, you know, like, if they support some form of violence against human beings, then my response is going to be that I can't vote for them. I can't support them. And really, like, that should be such a low bar, right? Like, it's literally like a piece of tape on the floor. Everyone should be able to get over that. But instead, I feel like they're just, like, digging themselves deeper and deeper and deeper into these systems of violence and really just entrenching the parties into these systems of violence. So I would say, when it comes to voting, obviously, like, you're going to vote your conscience ultimately. I, you know, can't strong arm you into voting how I want you to. But I'd say go into it with an informed conscience, go into it with the understanding that your vote in the long run will have an infinitesimally small impact on the outcome of the election. When it comes to city council spots, my vote is going to be one of thousands. When it comes to the president, it's going to be one of tens of millions, right? And so when we look at it that way, I think we begin to understand that our vote ultimately will have more of an impact on our conscience and which humans we're willing to throw under the bus for the sake of political expediency than it will on who wins the election. So there are a couple of other solutions that I want to point to, and that is ultimately the things that we do in our community day in and day out will have more of an impact on the lives of the people in our community than how we vote. So if you're living in community and solidarity and giving in mutual aid on a regular basis, that is going to have more of an impact than your one vote in any given election. So live those principles day in and day out, like live justice, Secondly, if you have the opportunity, and definitely push for this wherever you are, push for things like ranked choice voting or alternative voting systems that allow for third parties to gain more traction politically. I would also say, if you have the opportunity, look up different third parties. There's like a People's Party that's being started. There's the American Solidarity Party. There's the Green Party. There's the DSA. Like, there are different political movements that exist beyond Democrats and Republicans, and they need our backing in order to gain traction. And so, like, supporting movements like that is really vital, I think, for just creating a different paradigm of politics and voting in our nation in general. I do have like a piece that has been published on our blog and around the internet that was published maybe back in 2016, maybe 2012. I don't know. It was a long time ago. That was about, like the battle for the soul of our nation. And ultimately, my point is that your soul and like your moral and ethical foundation are going to be more impacted by your voting and who you're willing to throw under the bus. So I know that's maybe not an easy answer, but it's one that I continue to stand by. I think we still have time for one more question, if anyone wants to ask. Oh, I forgot to mention, I also have a whole other talk about like rejecting the two-party paradigm and because of the violence inherent in it. So if you want to hear that, there might be a recording somewhere. I'm not sure. But, it definitely exists. So if you want like my writing about that, feel free to reach out.
I think
Thank you, Joan. Sorry, I was responding to Joan's comment.
But yeah, so thank you so much for presenting and speaking today, Aimee. And I just wanted to let everyone know that next week on Wednesday, we will not be having a soup with substance because it is a mental health day on campus. But the following week on March 17th, we will. And that topic is going to be about community peacemaking research. I included the link in the chat for anyone who wants to sign up for that or future soup with substance events. And thanks again for speaking, Aimee, and everyone for coming today, and have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aimee. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, everybody.